Bet you didn't know Napoleon Bonaparte, the conqueror of Europe, was actually terrified of cats. Yes, you heard it right, folks. The man who faced armies shivered at the sight of a feline. Now let's take a moment to picture this, the indomitable Napoleon, the man who once said, "Impossible is a word to be found only in the dictionary of fools," quaking in his boots at the sight of a tabby cat. It's enough to make you chuckle, isn't it? This fear of cats, known as ailurophobia, is actually more common than you might think. But it's certainly amusing to imagine Napoleon, the man who bested empires, being bested by a creature no bigger than a loaf of bread. Perhaps his fear stemmed from the ancient Egyptian belief that cats were the guardians of the underworld. Or maybe, just maybe, he was unnerved by those piercing, judgmental eyes that seemed to say, "I'm on to you, Bonaparte." So, next time you see a cat, remember, even Napoleon Bonaparte would have run for the hills. What if I told you a country went to war with birds? Yes, you heard that right. Australia, the land of kangaroos and koalas, once declared war on emus. In the early 1930s, Australia was dealing with a rather peculiar crisis. A flock of 20,000 emus had migrated into the Campion region of Western Australia, and they were causing havoc on the local agriculture. These birds were not your ordinary garden variety, mind you. Standing at nearly 2 meters tall with a ravenous appetite for wheat, emus were a formidable foe for the local farmers. The farmers, many of whom were veterans of the First World War, did what any self-respecting soldier would do. They appealed to the military for help. Thus began what we now fondly refer to as the Great Emu War of Australia. Major G.P.W. Meredith of the 7th Heavy Battery of the Royal Australian Artillery was in command. Armed with 2 Lewis guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition, the military set out to combat the avian menace. But the emus proved to be a tougher adversary than anticipated. They scattered and ran at high speeds, making them hard to hit. Not to mention, these birds could take multiple bullets and still keep running. The operation was a spectacle, to say the least. Imagine, if you will, a group of soldiers in hot pursuit of a flock of emus, guns blazing in the vast Australian outback. It sounds like a scene straight out of a Monty Python sketch, doesn't it? Despite their best efforts, the military was forced to withdraw after a few weeks, having used up a significant portion of their ammunition. The emus, on the other hand, were barely affected. The war ended in an embarrassing defeat for the humans, with the emus claiming victory in this unlikely battle. So remember, never underestimate the power of a bird. They might just start a war. In 1518, the people of Strasbourg, France were struck by a dancing fever. They danced for days, and no, they weren't practicing for a flash mob. Picture this. It's a typical day in the 16th century Strasbourg, when suddenly folks start busting out moves on the streets, not just a few people but hundreds of them. And it wasn't the kind of dancing you'd see at a royal ball. No, these were wild, frenzied, non-stop dance-a-thons. Now you might be thinking, hey, maybe they were just really into their music back then. But here's the catch, there was no music, no beat, no rhythm, no catchy tunes. These people were literally dancing to the beat of their own drums, or perhaps, the lack thereof. It started with one woman, Frau Trophea. She kicked off her shoes and started to jig, but this was no ordinary jig. She danced for nearly a week straight. Yes, you heard that right, a week, and she wasn't alone for long. Within a month, around 400 people had joined in this bizarre dance fever. Doctors were baffled. They couldn't figure out why these people wouldn't stop dancing. Their best guess? Hot blood, they said. Their solution? More dancing. They even cleared halls and built stages to accommodate the dancers. But alas, the dancing didn't stop. In fact, it got worse. People danced until they collapsed from exhaustion. Some even danced until, well, their final breath. Historians today still scratch their heads over this bizarre incident. Some suggest it was a case of mass hysteria. Others point to ergot poisoning, a hallucinogenic mold that grows on damp rye. But the truth? It remains as elusive as a perfectly executed moonwalk. So next time you can't stop dancing to your favorite tune, remember, it could be worse. You could be in 1518 Strasbourg.